encouraging, educating, and empowering you into action. This is Warriors Talk with your host, Lady ReShell.
Hello. Welcome to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we move away from awareness towards action. It's Health and Wellness Monday, and our topic for today is take control of breast cancer risk factors. We are live on Intellectual Radio. We just heard from the Drive at 5 with Roman. Keep it locked right here on Intellectual Radio and allow us to feed your brain. On the last episode of Warriors Talk, Dr. Michelle and I discussed Breaking the Silence, Understanding PCOS. You can head over to YouTube and type in Intellectual Radio. Stay connected for any episodes you may have missed. The quote of the day is, when cancer happens, you don't have to put life on hold. You live now. We are so grateful for our sponsor. We have Pastor Michael Richardson with the Emmanuel Church of God in Christ, who has a special message for us.
Greetings, I am Pastor Michael Richardson.
And I am First Lady Anastasia Richardson from the Emmanuel Church of God in Christ. We're located at 3058 West Van Buren in Chicago, Illinois. We are building upon a solid foundation.
We're inviting you to join us every Sunday morning on Facebook Live at Emmanuel Kojic at 10:15 Central Standard Time. You can also view our videos on our YouTube channel at Emmanuel Kojic-MR. Once again, this is Pastor Michael Richardson
and First Lady Anastasia Richardson, and we're from the Emmanuel Church of God in Christ. We are building upon a solid foundation.
If you are tuned in on the show, share the show, invite someone else in on the show that you feel may benefit from this valuable information. My special guest today lives in Decatur, Georgia. She is the CEO of the firm ANL Risk Advisory Services, that is, got tongue-tied. And she provides IT consulting services to organizations. She is dedicated to increasing awareness of breast cancer, especially triple-negative breast cancer. She prays that more young men and women would be aware of their breast cancer risk factors to potentially reduce their chances of being diagnosed. After a diagnosis, she says it's important to understand why you should be the CEO of your health. Welcome again to Warriors Talk, Marquita Bass. Hey, Marquita.
Hi, Lady ReShell. Thank you for having me again.
How are you?
I am awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day in the Chi, so I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's wonderful weather in Atlanta.
Oh, good. Yes. So our topic, take control of breast cancer risk factors. Now, we know that it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and awareness basically can be defined as having a perception or knowledge of something. We know that awareness does not equal action. It does not really lead to results. It's what you do with that awareness that makes the difference. So today on this episode, we're going to give you information where you can walk away with and take action with breast cancer, that you can control these particular risk factors. All right, Marquita, let's get started. I do want to talk about first, I want to talk about the risk factors that are not controllable so that people will also be aware of those. And then we'll get into the risk factors that you can control, something that you can do about your breast cancer risk factors. All right.
And ReShell, do you mind if we go back again and just briefly talk about what is breast cancer?
Absolutely.
Because, I want people to know, first of all breast cancer is not the same. And I don't want to meet another woman who has had breast cancer or has breast cancer, and she cannot articulate what type of breast cancer. That's the problem.
That is a problem, yes.
So I just want to briefly talk about, all breast cancer is not the same. And typically when you hear the media talk about breast cancer, they're talking about hormone-positive breast cancer. And that's probably 17 to 80% of diagnosis. Excuse me. So what does hormone-positive mean? It means you had a cancer cell And cancer cells have something I'm going to call like antennas on the cells. And those cells feed on female hormones, progesterone and estrogen. And that's why it's called hormone positive breast cancer. And then there's maybe 5 to 10% of cancers, breast cancer, that may be HER2 positive. So what does that mean? That means your body produces a large amount of the protein HER2, and your cancer feeds on that. So that means it's HER2 positive. So I'm going to stop here quickly and say those two types of breast cancer have what's called a targeted treatment. There are things they can do, medications that you can take to affect the level of estrogen in your body and consequently help with your hormone positive breast cancer. There's also medication, an antibody medication, Herceptin, that they give women who have HER2. Now, the third category represents about 10 to maybe 15% of cancers. It depends on the study. And that is called triple negative breast cancer. That just means it doesn't fall into the other two categories. That's what triple negative means. It's not hormone positive. It's not HER2. So it's triple negative. And unfortunately, triple negative on its own is not one type of cancer. There are different subtypes. And it tends to be aggressive. Some triple negative ones are not as aggressive, but it tends to be aggressive. It tends to recur more frequently, and it tends to affect African-American women disproportionately. So I wanted to make sure that we start out with what is breast cancer and how you get it. And next I want to start out with what is the risk factor, because I don't want anyone who's listening to this to think, oh, if I have on these risk factors, I'm going to get breast cancer. That is absolutely not true. That will not happen. That's no guarantee. But you may have an increased risk of getting breast cancer. And risk factors is actually one of the things I enjoy talking about, because a lot of the risk factors for breast cancer can help you avoid other cancers also. So that's where I kind of wanted to start out with Lady ReShell, to just kind of give that background information.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect.
Before
we do the risk factors, I just want to let everybody know why we're talking about risk factors versus talking about preventing breast cancer. Because some people say, well, why are we focusing on risk factors? Why can't we focus on preventing breast cancer? And I would say because right now there is no sure way to prevent breast cancer. And
absolutely, so I agree with you, Lady ReShell, 100%. You cannot have any risk factors and you can do everything right and stuff just happens. Now, I don't want to say stuff, but I'll say stuff here. Stuff just happens in life. You can't prevent, but I just think it's incumbent upon people who want to at least try to manage their risk factors. For me, that's important because when things happen to me, I can say, I've done all I can do. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, the keyword you used was manage. So this is not something that is a one and done, but this is something that you're doing over your lifetime.
Exactly. And you wanted to talk about first about non-controllable risk factors. You have non-controllable risk factors, and there are risk factors that you can control. And guess what the number one non-controllable risk factor is? Raise your hand if you know.
I'm sure I do.
Having breasts. That's your number one risk factor for breast cancer. And that means that applies to women. I'm sorry, women, men. I have a good friend now. He has breast cancer. But having breasts is your number one risk factor. And I think that's why it's so important to know about breast cancer, because oftentimes, I'm guilty of this also, you think about it happening to somebody else. You don't think about it happening to you. But having breasts is the number one non-controllable risk factor. You can't do anything about that. I'm going to end with the most important one that I think is very important. The science and literature says getting older. I think you and I, we believe the same. We think the same way with this. The majority of the women who I've met recently or who I'm meeting are diagnosed before 40 or 50. Now, I'm not saying getting older is not a risk factor, but a lot of younger women are being diagnosed with breast cancer. And the American Cancer Society actually noted this. Do you have anything to add about that, ReShell, about getting older?
I just feel like they need to update their information because the numbers are alarming when it comes to young women, especially African American women, being diagnosed with breast cancer and younger than age 50. So I believe they need to update their information.
I was 48 years old when I was diagnosed. How old were you?
43.
ReShell?
43.
Oh, wow. Yeah. My cousin was in her 30s. The list goes on. So consequently, I'm not sure of where they're getting this notion
Exactly.
that I'm sorry, my computer is about to, hold on, let me get my charger. I'm
No, go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah, I feel like the information that they have been putting out for years and years needs to be updated. I don't know how often they come out with information, but they need to update it because younger women are being diagnosed with breast cancer. Someone I had on the show as young as 19 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So we do know that it happens to older women, but more frequently it's happening to women that are younger than that age of 50. So I don't want women to get comfortable thinking that. I think it sends out a dangerous message to women, to have them thinking that, oh, I don't have to be worried about breast cancer until I get 50, because the statistics out there say most women are diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 50, and I don't have to worry about getting a mammogram until 40. So I feel like that's putting information out there that can actually harm individuals. And I can't hear you for some reason.
Okay. I'm back.
Okay.
I agree with you 100%. And I just want to encourage more younger women to think about breast cancer and your risk factors. And another risk factor is hereditary, a genetic disposition. And fortunately, less than 10% of cases are hereditary. The BRCA gene is tied to triple negative breast cancer, actually. But now they have what's called the alphabet soup gene, bowl of genes that they've identified that are also tied to breast cancer. When I had my genetic test, there were a lot of genes that they tested for. So now BRCA is the most widely known gene, of the gene that you typically tested for. But there are other breast cancer risk factors. And since we're talking about genetics, I want to add, and Google this and talk to your doctor. There are some studies that say there's some relationship between prostate cancer and breast cancer. So if you are a man and you've been diagnosed with prostate cancer, you may want to talk to your doctor and go to a geneticist to see, if you need to get tested, because you could save the lives of your daughters. The next factor, which is, a pet peeve of mine, and I'm very concerned about this risk factor. You can't control it, but I really want women to know, is dense breasts. Dense breasts can be a risk factor for breast cancer. And a lot of times, if you go get a mammogram, you get a letter that says, you have dense breasts, and that's the end of it. If that happens to you, I want you to go back to your doctor and kick and scream and say you want an advanced screening, because mammogram may not be the most accurate tool for a woman who has dense breasts in order to find the cancer. So dense breasts, if you hear it, if you get the letter, I want you to be the CEO of your health. You hear me say that all the time. You are the CEO of your health, and ask for an advanced screening. And if the doctor doesn't want to, guess what you can do? Fire her and find another doctor, because the science is out there, the research is out there that says that you may be at an increased risk of getting breast cancer if you have a dense breast. And I want to make sure I've covered everything.
I want to give them a picture of what dense breast would look like. So if you had like cotton and you were to put cotton in a glass, like fill it with cotton, pack it with cotton, and then try to get a camera and see through the cotton, right? Put something in there and you're looking for it and try to find it. And that's how dense breasts look when it's on the mammogram. They can't see through it because the cancer looks just like the dense tissue that's in there. So that's why they have to get a more advanced test done, so they're able to find a lump if it's in the breast, which is it could be so dangerous, because a lot of them do get missed because they may not go or may not get the recommendation to say, hey, we didn't find anything. But just because they didn't find anything on a mammogram doesn't mean that anything is not there, because they need a more advanced test.
I love that analogy. I have never heard that analogy before, because I was thinking, maybe tissue, like just tissue that you can't see through. But you're right. If you look at a radiation mammography film, it looks like cotton. It's white, and they can't see through it. Where did you find that analogy? I love that.
I heard it somewhere, and it made so much sense. I saw the picture in my mind, and I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
I love that. And the last risk factor that you cannot control, maybe exposure to radiation. If you had exposure to radiation to your chest, studies show that radiation can cause cancer. So exposure to radiation. Again, these risk factors don't mean that you would get breast cancer, but we just want you to be aware of these risk factors.
Yes.
So those are the risk factors that you cannot control. Reproductive history, I like that. I forgot about, I don't have that one. It says women's starting menstrual periods before age 12 and starting menopause after age 55 expose women to hormones longer. And we know that your lifetime exposure to estrogen increases your risk of breast cancer. I had forgotten about reproductive history. That's a risk factor.
Another risk factor is your own personal history.
Okay. Your own personal history of breast cancer. And that's something to think about. If you had breast cancer in the past, you're at a higher risk of having breast cancer. And, for years, that bothered me somewhat. I thought about it. Now I live my life every day as if I am not going to have a recurrence. But once you've been diagnosed with breast cancer, any type of cancer, it's in the back of your mind that it can happen again.
Yes. I feel like anytime something is wrong or aching on you and you're like, oh my God, it's, I think at the beginning of my diagnosis, once I was declared no evidence of disease, I think at that time it might have been like on alert for me. Then as time passed by, it's like, maybe it's not. Like, you won't be so heightened and paranoid thinking that everything that's happening or hurting or aching you can be cancer.
Because otherwise, you're almost a prisoner, because you're worried about everything. So with time, it improved for me, that I didn't think everything that happened to me could be a recurrence. And something else that I didn't write about and I don't think about, if you've had cancer in one breast and you just maybe have had a lumpectomy, you are at greater risk of having contralateral cancer. That's cancer in the other breast. And I'm not saying women should, have a double mastectomy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's something that you need to consider and have a conversation with your breast surgeon about when you're deciding on what type of surgery you're going to have.
Absolutely. I heard someone say that having in the back of your mind that cancer could return, you could have a recurrence. It's like having a loaded gun just at the back of your head, and you don't know when the trigger is going to go off. So it's there, and you can feel how you can feel it pressing against the back of your skull. You just don't know when the trigger is going to be pulled. And I always talk about how genetics loads the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So, and that's what we're talking about today, things that you can control, lifestyle changes that you can do to help decrease your risk of these breast cancer risk factors.
Very good analogy. So now we're going to talk about risk factors that you can change, you can control or manage. It's how I like to say.
I like manage.
These are things that you can manage.
Yes.
And I don't want to give the impression to anyone who's listening to this conversation who has cancer that you caused your cancer. That's not the message that we want to convey tonight. The message that we want to convey is be aware of your risk factors to decrease your chances possibly of getting breast cancer, or if you've had breast cancer, decrease your chances of maybe having a recurrence. That's the only message we're trying to convey. And I'm going to show something. Dr. Christy Funk wrote this book, Breast. And if you have a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter, or females, I recommend that you read her book. It's like a guide, or ownership guide to breast. And the first couple of chapters just teach you about the risk factors and things that you can do to maybe reduce your chances of getting breast cancer. So when I read this book, I give it to everyone I know, and I just recommend that women get her book. So now let's talk about risk factors that you can control. And the first one I'm going to talk about is being overweight. And that's a hard conversation to have because it's very hard. I mean, okay, I'm going to say this. My name is Marquita Bass, and I am an addict. I'm a sugar addict. And we know added sugar does what? Increases your weight. And you know you're a sugar addict. And I'm just going to be real. I knew I would say sugar addict when, excuse me, I would bring like cookies. I know I can't bring cookies in my house. So I said, I'm going to just buy these cookies and I'm going to eat a couple. And I would bring the cookies home and I would eat a couple. And then I would find myself eating some more. And then I would throw them in the garbage. And this is hard for me to admit, but I'm going to put it out there and just share it because this is something I've had to overcome. And I have overcome, so I want to share my story. So you are an addict when you throw the cookies away and do what?
Go back in the garbage and get them.
Go back to the trash can and get the cookies. Oh my gosh, that is like, I knew at that point I had a problem. So now I don't bring sweets into my house. I don't have sugar, white sugar in my home. And I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but I'm just sharing with you, that was my challenge. No white sugar in my house. And I'm sharing this story because weight is a problem for a lot of people. And it's grounded in a lot of different things. It can be stress. It can be, because you just like to eat a lot. They're just big, other variables. It could be emotional eating. For me, I just like sugar. And also, I was listening to Mark Hyman. Dr. Mark Hyman is a functional doctor. And I listen to a lot of functional doctors. And he said that sugar triggers the dopamine in your brain like cocaine. It's like a high. Is that crazy?
Try doing without sugar for 30 days and see how your body feels and see once you have withdrawals. I tried it.
That is incredible. So consequently, I don't bring sweets into my home. Now, I'm not saying I don't ever eat sweets, but it's when I go out to eat, it's a treat. And that's something that I had to overcome. And I wanted to share that story because we're all struggling with our diets. And unfortunately, weight is not good, or being overweight is not good when it comes to breast cancer, because the added fat triggers more estrogen in your body. And what did we say? Your lifetime exposure to estrogen increases your chances of getting breast cancer. And weight is not good. Being overweight is not good for a lot of different reasons, but being overweight is a risk factor. And I want to encourage anyone who may be having challenges to take it one day at a time. And if you can, just eat less saturated fat. I call it the 3 S's. Saturated fat, a lot of added sugar, and salt. It's killing us. That's why I call it 3 S's. So weight is one of the risk factors that we can control. And I'm going to read something from Dr. Font's book. She says, the key to understand food to protect yourself from breast cancer is to understand that food holds the power to alter the following factors inside of you. Estrogen levels, that's what we just talked about. Growth factors, new blood vessels, inflammation, and we know high or too much inflammation creates an environment where cancer cells can thrive. And guess what? Your immune system function. So if your immune system is not functioning the way it should function and cancer cells occur, you don't have the ability, your immune system can't kill these cells. Your body is designed to kill off things that are not supposed to be there. Also, this is very important. Each of these factors affect what we call a tumor's microenvironment. So we want to be able to have a microenvironment through eating good foods to kill off cancer cells. So the next is, you want to add anything? Because I know you're a vegan, you're very particular about your diet. ReShell, anything you want to add when it comes to food and weight as far as a risk factor?
Well, I found this statistic. It says 80% or 4 out of 5 Black women are considered overweight or obese. I think we
80%?
have...
Did I hear you
It
say
says
80%?
80. I think we have become comfortable with being overweight and it looks the norm. So if you don't look like that, then you don't look like the norm. because we're so used to being overweight or not in our weight class. It looks normal. So anytime somebody is not that, something must be wrong.
All I can say is, wow.
And by
I never thought about it like that.
By me being a vegan and not eating meat, I tend to be on the thinner side because I don't eat the processed. I don't do a lot of processed foods. I don't do meat, period. I don't do cheese. I don't do eggs. So I have to get my protein through, plant-based proteins, beans, nuts, avocados, things of that nature. So yeah, I've heard a lot of stuff, and it's funny because it's not something that we're asking you to do in one setting. It's not a diet, but it's a lifestyle. So you can incorporate healthier lifestyle choices every single day. Every single day, you could choose not to eat certain things, and then it becomes a part of your norm. But I feel like because things are not happening immediate, it may not happen. Cancer doesn't happen the next day. Sometimes it's in your system 10 years before it rears its ugly head, right? And so whatever you're putting in your body up until that time, and then it comes, like you're setting up you mentioned environment, you're setting up that environment, that unhealthy environment for cancer to come in because it doesn't have any of the right nutrients to fight off those cancer cells.
I agree with you. I'm still fixated on 80%, the 80% number. I didn't know that number.
80%.
That causes me to feel sad. And you're right. It has become the new norm. And I get it. I understand. However, if we want to be healthier, aside from just breast cancer, we're talking about health. If you want to be healthier, it's imperative that you make other food choices. And I don't know if one diet is a one diet fits all. Studies show that plant-based, the more the plants you eat, the healthier you tend to be. For me, when I was diagnosed in 2012, I tried to be vegan for maybe almost a year. That didn't work for me being vegan, but I eat meat maybe 2 or 3 times a week. That works for me. For me, I wasn't getting enough protein, and also it caused me to feel depressed. So something in my system needs the meat. Now, what I try to do is eat mostly salmon, cod, mostly fish. Not otherwise, salmon, cod, sardines, and that works for me. But I think it's important for you to figure out what will work for you, but to make changes, because if you're currently experiencing weight problems, you may want to make some changes. And thank you for sharing that. That kind of makes me feel sad. I didn't know that. Yeah. I want to get to the next risk factor, and alcohol consumption. And it's kind of interesting because doctors will tell you, well, is it 4 ounces of wine per night and you're okay? Last year, and I have this on my Facebook page, an article, and I didn't get a chance to get the article before the show. Now they're saying no amount of alcohol may be safe. They don't know. And I'm not saying stop drinking alcohol. I'm just sharing risk factors. But think about it. Alcohol also affects like colon cancer, because alcohol disrupts your endocrine system. When I say endocrine system, I'm talking about hormones. And if it's disrupting your hormone system, your estrogen level, it may increase your chances of getting cancer. Now, again, I admit the studies are all over the place. For years I heard 4 ounces of wine per night, you're okay. And recently, there are more studies coming out that say they don't know. if any level of alcohol is safe.
That's
it may depend on the individual, because I know people who who can drink one glass of whatever and they're like lit, So some people may metabolize alcohol differently. So consequently, the consequences may be different. I don't know. Do you have any?
Well, what I've been hearing the studies saying no amount of alcohol is good, none. But they're saying drinking alcohol, even in small amounts, increases your risk of breast cancer. So they're cautioning people to even not drink at all.
Okay. So you've heard what I heard. That's what they're saying lately. It's like no amount of alcohol is safe.
That's something that you can control. You don't necessarily have to drink.
Yeah.
Think about why it is that you have to drink. What's the root cause of you having a drink?
I agree with you 100%. Especially for women who have hormone positive cancer, because hormone positive cancer, as we talked about earlier, is driven by what? Estrogen. And we know that alcohol affects your endocrine system. So hormone positive women who've been diagnosed really need to take that into consideration. And, I would drink maybe 3 or 4 times a year, special occasions. I'm going to tell you what happened to me recently. My cousin in her 50s was diagnosed with colon cancer. And she's a 2-time breast cancer survivor. I'm devastated. This just happened maybe 3 weeks ago. So I've been doing research on what causes colon cancer and, just a lot of research. So I'm done, 3 or 4 times a year. I'm just done. I'm going to go with the studies that say no amount of alcohol is safe. I'm done. And it's because of that experience. It's unfortunate. Every day I'm trying to make choices to increase my health and to be healthy. I'm not trying not to die. I'm trying to live and do things that are going to make me healthy. So alcohol. Something else that I read are breast implants. Now, I don't know if the breast implants cause the cancer. I read one study that said that they're finding around breast implants, you may have these capsules that are forming, and they're finding cancer in those capsules around the implants. When I was diagnosed in 2012, the nurse told me she would not get breast implants because you can't do really good screenings when you have breast implants. Now with the 3D mammograms, they may be able to do really good screenings. I don't know. But just know your risk factors for increasing your risk of breast cancer if you get breast implants, and just have a conversation with your plastic surgeon when it comes to breast implants. Also, another controllable risk factor that I have, it says using hormone prescriptions. And that means maybe taking birth control pills long-term. I've read studies that say taking birth control pills long-term may be good for you. I've read studies that say it may not be good for you. But this is how I rationalize taking birth control pills. We've already established that a woman's long-term exposure to estrogen can risk of breast cancer. So what?
It has
hormones, estrogen, progesterone, or whatever. So I think that one is controversial. I don't know. I've heard studies, to say one, both ways. I would just be leery if I were a younger woman, and I would really have conversations with my doctors, because some women have to take birth control pills for bleeding and other reasons. But I would really suggest having a conversation if you are taking birth control pills. And something else I want to say about taking birth control pills. I have a good friend, and she said, I think she told me she took birth control pills for maybe 20 years. She had stopped, and she was getting her mammograms on time, once a year, no signs of breast cancer. And a new radiologist read her film the last time she went to get a mammogram and said, oh, I want to do a MRI on you. She ended up being diagnosed with lobular breast cancer. And lobular breast cancer does not present as a tumor, like it's a solid mass. It doesn't present as a tumor. It presents like over the breast, and it's missed. And there are studies that say that women who've taken birth control pills for a long time may be at an increased risk of getting lobular breast cancer. I'm just putting that out there. Have a conversation with your doctors, but that's something to think about.
Yeah,
and
that's scary.
That's very. And we had when I was diagnosed. No, she was diagnosed after I was diagnosed. So she was diagnosed in 2019. And she and I was diagnosed in 2012. And we were out at dinner. And I want to cry when I think about, the conversation, because I can still hear her voice. And she looked at me and said, Marquita, how could I have gotten my mammograms all of these years? They didn't find anything. And now I have stage 2 lobular breast cancer. I was quiet. I couldn't say anything. So I immediately went home and did my research, and I found out that it's hard to diagnose, and there may be a relationship between taking birth control pills for a long time and lobular breast cancer. I don't know. I'm trying to see what other risk factor what have I missed?
I have down here staying physically active, which is really important. It could go with weight too. That can
I
coincide
agree with
with.
you. You know what? Exercise, man, it's like a miracle drug.
Yes, it is.
It is a miracle drug. And I'm not talking because I don't do strenuous exercise. And my advice is do an exercise that you enjoy, because you're more likely to do it and continue. But I try to exercise at least 5 days a week. And I'm talking about just walking. I have a rebounder. A rebound is like a mini trampoline. And when I don't have a lot of time, I get on my rebounder for like 10 or 15 minutes. We have to just move. Just move. But exercise, it's a miracle drug. It's good for you. It's weight. It's good for my mental health. I don't know about you, ReShell.
Oh,
but it's
definitely.
good for my mental health. And also, there's something about exercise. It just gets things moving. It's good for your cholesterol. They say it's good for, if you're diabetic, if you just walk and exercise. It's just, like I said, it's a miracle drug. So I really like stay physically active, and that's kind of tied into weight. That's a very good one too.
Another one is managing your stress. I thought this one was very important because I feel like, for me, I was stressed a couple of years before my diagnosis, and then I end up getting a diagnosis. So I know that chronic stress, anxiety has a negative impact on your overall health, especially your immune system as well.
Wow. And that one you can manage, but it's just harder to manage. Chronic stress is a silent killer. I'm going to say that again. Chronic stress is a silent killer. And like you said, ReShell, it causes inflammation. It just kills your immune system. And your immune system is probably your number one defense against any type of cancer or illness. But that's a hard one. That how do you manage your stress? Because the year before I was diagnosed, I had shingles, and my dermatologist, she said your body is just trying to. You're in a fight or flight. Your body is trying to just survive. A year before I was diagnosed, and I met other women who had like rashes or different type of things the year before they were diagnosed that may have been caused by stress. But how do we manage that? You know, how do you exercise helps, but how do you manage your stress, ReShell?
Mine was the exercise. And then I just stopped. I really stopped stressing about things that really didn't have a direct effect on me. I just be like, and sometimes my kids be like, Ma, you see that? You're not even saying anything. And I'm just like, I'm not gonna let it affect me. Then I go out and I enjoy myself. I do things with my kids, I do things for myself, with my girlfriends, and I release some of that stress just by doing that. I think exercise is my number one. Whenever I exercise, if I'm stressed and I exercise, when I'm done, I forgot what I'm even stressed about.
Yeah, your body feels much better. I exercise and I don't care about too much of anything anymore. I just don't care. Things that I cannot control, I had to stop being a type A person. That type A personality will kill you. I was always trying to be perfect. I always tried to have things a certain way. And I cared about too much. And now I only care about things that I can control. Period. I've had to set up emotional boundaries. I've set up personal boundaries with people. And this may sound elitist, but I will remove a toxic individual out of my life with the quickness. And I really think that much about it. I'm not saying I just dismiss people. That's not what I'm saying. It's that now I have the ability and willingness to really analyze a relationship. And if it's causing me more harm than good, that person can't be in my space. And if the individual doesn't love me, respect me, and is not kind to me, he or she can't be in my space. And I'm doing that for my health, for my personal health. And that's how I've learned to manage stress.
Okay, we're gonna do this last one right before we wrap up. And
Okay.
this one is talking about the red meat, the processed meat consumption, which is known as they call it a group 1 or a class 1 carcinogen, which means that is known to cause cancer.
Yeah, anytime the FDA says something like that, we know it's true. They have classified red meat as a type 1, group 1
Yep.
carcinogen. Do you guys know what carcinogen means? It causes cancer. That's a very good one. Also, red meat and processed meat when it comes to colon cancer. People need to know that. And I know we're talking about breast cancer, but I have to share this. Get your colonoscopies. Colon cancer is very treatable, but you can't treat what you don't know you have. So I'm advising people, please get your colonoscopies.
Marquita, can you give us some words of wisdom as it relates to take control of your breast cancer risk factors?
Make a choice. Make a choice, a personal choice that you matter and that you want to do what's necessary to change. Because until that happens, nothing will change. And that's a choice too. You're making a choice not to do anything. But if health matters for you, make a choice and do it little by little, just one day at a time. Just decide on one of the risk factors that you want to address and don't give up, but make a choice and do what you can do in order to improve, because we're all improving every single day. But make a personal choice that you want to improve your chances.
How can listeners stay connected to you? Connected to you?
Oh, sure. On Instagram, Miss Marquita Bass. On Facebook, Orange is the New Pink ATL. And I have a website, marquitabass.com.
Thank you so much, Marquita. I appreciate your wisdom and the experience that you shared with us on today. Always a joy.
Thank you. I'm always happy to come to your show and to interact with you. It's always a great experience.
Thank you so much. You guys don't go anywhere. Coming up next on Intellectual Radio is Pillow Talk with God. I'll give you these words of wisdom. Cancer is a word, not the entire sentence. Join me next Monday right here on Intellectual Radio at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. As always, thank you for tuning in to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we are changing lives one warrior at a time.
Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell. To follow at Warriors Talk, the number 1 on all social media outlets, and Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell on YouTube. Please join us next week and every Monday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on IntellectualRadio.com. Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell, where we encourage, educate, and empower you into action.